Ladies and gentlemen, to today's tutorial. Now today we want to look at the liver. Now remember that the liver is a solid organ. Yes, it will have functional parenchyma being the hepatocyte. In addition, it will have a capsule, which is the glycans capsule. Yes, this liver is actually an intraperitoneal organ. Yes, usually finds itself in the right upper quadrant. Yes, or even in terms of regions of the abdomen, and it's going to be found actually in the right hypochondriac. Yes, some portion in the left hypochondriac. Yes, even sometimes in the epigastric regions. Now this organ is the largest organ, yes, in the human body. Actually, yes, that's not the largest organ, the largest gland in the human body, or the largest internal organ. Then of course, if you talk about the largest organ, is actually the skin, which weighs about 4.5 to about 5 kilograms. But for the liver, it's weighing around 1.5 kilograms, so it's approximately 3 pounds. Now this organ, yes, in fetal life is going to be relevant as far as hematopoiesis is concerned, production of red blood cells. Yes, apart from this, yes, it's going to be important, as far as metabolism of drugs, detoxification of drugs or poisons is going to be important. Yes, deamination of amino acids, urea, by synthesis is going to take place in the liver. Now remember that the liver is a central, metabolic site where actually carbohydrates, yes, proteins, yes, as well as lipids, their metabolism is going to take place there, either by synthesis or their, catabolism is going to actually take place in there. Now, even apart from this, plasma proteins will be produced there. That is why if there's a liver problem, such as, cirrhosis or hepatocellular carcinoma, and the liver is not able to functionally produce these plasma proteins, then it's going to result in something that we call, edema happening in the abdomen. There will be accumulation of fluid, ascites taking place there, and it can even result in pedal edema as well. So these are some of the functions actually the liver performs. Now the liver is not only there, it's intimately at its inferior parts actually associated with the gallbladder, so which we are going to look at them. So this is the liver. You can see this is actually a wedge-shaped, yes, organ having a very larger right lobe and a smaller left lobe. Now you realize that this left lobe is actually tapers, becomes quite smaller, sharply tapers, and then you have a bulky right lobe. Now what we find is that yes, this area that I'm showing you is actually the diaphragmatic surface. And this diaphragmatic surface is actually forms the anterior portion of the liver, and then at the opposite aspect we are going to have what we call the superior surface of the liver, and then of course at its lower aspect we are going to have what we call the inferior surface of the liver. Now what we find is that yes, the superior surface and the posterior surface is more or less continuous with each other. Therefore, we tend to give it a common name, posterior inferior surface, and that is the area that is related to the viscera that the liver is related with or associated with, and therefore we call this area the visceral surface. Now, if you can look at it, what we find is that yes, the anterior surface is quite a bit smooth compared to the posterior inferior surface, because this posterior inferior surface is associated with these viscera, and therefore they make impressions on the liver. Now one thing is that yes, you get to know that the liver is actually a very heavy organ. Yes, please look at this area. Now connecting the liver to the posterior surface of the anterior abdominal wall is this double layer of peritoneum known as falciform ligament. And this actually demarcates, serves as a landmark so that you can separate the liver into a larger right lobe and a smaller left lobe. Now when we get to the visceral surface also presents with some lobes, accessory lobes that we can add in addition to these two main lobes, right and left lobes. Now, these lobes, which we are going to find, is that at getting the posterior aspect of the posterior superior surface, posterior inferior surface, that is the visceral surface, we have this lobe, which is actually shaped like, the tail of a rabbit, and we call it the caudate lobe. Caudate has to do caudal, has to do with tail, caudate lobe. Now, this caudate lobe, therefore, anatomically, is part of the right lobe, because what happens is that, yes, if we are dividing it, and this is the first form ligament, run all the way, yes, anterior portion, we are going to find this area being the left lobe and this area being the right lobe. So what we find is that anatomically, then the caudate lobe will be part of the right lobe of the liver. Now realize that this caudate lobe is actually having a connection with the right lobe of the liver by way of what we call the caudate process. And then at its inferior portion, opposite, we are going to have what we call the papillary process over here. Now, on the left lobe of the liver, yes, just lateral to the papillary process, we are going to find what we call mental tuberosity, where the lesser omentum will have relation with. Now, what we find again is that at its inferior portion, when we look at the inferior aspect, we also find another lobe, which is four-sided. This is known as quadrate lobe. At its most inferior portion, we are having the quadrate lobe. Now, what we find is that these lobes are actually found in some areas, fissures, which will help us in knowing which lobe we are talking about. Now, this caudate lobe finds itself between what we call the groove for inferior vena cava on the right. Let me show it here. So there we are. This is the inferior vena cava. So the groove that the inferior vena cava traverses actually forms one of the boundaries, yes, to the right actually, of the caudate lobe. Now, on the opposite aspect, we also have the groove for another ligament, which is known as ductus venosum. Ligamentum venosum. So ligamentum, venosum, So ligamentum venosum, which used to be actually what we call the ductus venosus. And this ductus venosus in fetal life was responsible for shunting blood from the left portal vein to the left hepatic vein, actually bypassing the hepatic, or hepatic circulation, actually the liver, or bypass what we call first pass metabolism. So that is what we call, it used to be ductus venosus, actually is oxygenated blood, ductus venosus. And this time around this is the groove for ligamentum venosum, UM for US for US. Now, so let me show you that ligament. This is the ligament, which is called ligamentum venosum, forming actually one of the boundaries actually to the left of the caudate lobe of the liver. Now, at the inferior aspect, we also have, we've seen this four-sided lobe, accessory lobe, that we say anatomically is part of the right lobe. It's also bounded, on the right by this area, that's the fossa for the gallbladder. So this is the gallbladder, fossa for the gallbladder. Remember that the gallbladder is a circular structure. It's one of the accessory organs of the digestive system. Yes, what it does is that you're going to, stop, concentrate, and upon, contraction, by way of influence from, the cholecystokinin, yes, it will release, the bile that has concentrated, into, the common bile duct. So that's the liver and its fossa. This is the fossa for the gallbladder, which actually is the right boundary of this, quadrate lobe. Now, at the opposite side, to the left, we are having this round ligament, which is known as ligamentum teres hepatis. That's the round ligament of the liver. The word, teres has to do with round ligament of the liver. Now, this ligament used to be what we call the left, umbilical vein. So this is actually, the obliterated or the remnant of the left umbilical vein, which is actually responsible for actually, carrying oxygenated blood, from the umbilical cord to the left, portal vein, So that's the round ligament of the liver. So we find these ones as, the accessory lobes that we find. Now realize that as we descend, from the area, the fissure for what we call, ligamentum venosum, through to the area where we have the fissure for the round ligament of the liver, ligamentum teres hepatis. Realize that there's one line over here, and we can have another line as we move inferiorly from the groove of the inferior vena cava to what we call the fossa of the gallbladder. Yes, inferiorly. We also have, as if you have one line, so there are two bars. Now these two bars will be completed, form an H by this area, which is known as Porta hepatis. That's the gateway into the liver, Porta hepatis. So this transverse fissure of the liver will complete this H-shaped structure for us. Now remember that, yes, this inferior vena cava, which is the superior portion actually of the inferior vena cava, will drain, yes, that's the inferior vena cava, will receive, blood from the, what we call, hepatic, veins. There are three hepatic veins actually. Yes, we're going to have, the left hepatic vein. There will be left hepatic vein. There will be a middle hepatic vein. There will be a middle hepatic vein, and then of course there will be a right, hepatic vein, which will actually, drain the output into what we call the inferior vena cava. Now, having seen these, being the lobes of the liver, however, physiologically, interestingly, if you take an imaginary line from the area of, the gallbladder, area of the fissure or the groove for the inferior vena cava, yes, as you come, this time around, going to, from the area, so for the groove of, let's say, the fossa of the gallbladder, all the way to about one half of the caudate lobe, yes, to come posteriorly. Then physiologically we can divide, the liver into, two, left and right, lobes again. But this time around they are physiological. Therefore, what happens is that the quadrate lobe physiologically belongs to the left lobe of the liver, as well as one half of the, the lobe of the caudate. Yes, the caudate lobe will belong to the left lobe of the liver. So that's the physiological aspect. Now, having seen this, now what happens is that, yes, the liver is a very large organ. Yes, it is going to be supported by ligaments. Yes, we have several ligaments holding it. Yes, because it's a very heavy organ. So let's look at some ligament apart from, yes, these ligaments that we've seen already. We're also going to have what we call this peritoneal reflections represent actually what we call the superior, or what we call the anterior coronary ligament. And this area, if you can see, represents the posterior coronary ligament or the inferior coronary ligament. Now eventually these ones will meet at this point, actually forming what we call the right triangular ligament. And that area where the superior and inferior met to form this area will be devoid of peritoneum. Therefore, we call this area bare area of the liver. So for you to identify the bare area of the liver, just look for the two coronary ligaments on either side, and where they are meeting to form the right triangular ligament. That area is the bare area of the liver. Well, there are some other areas of the liver which is also devoid of peritoneum. Yes, if you look at the groove for inferior vena cava will also be devoid of peritoneum, as well as the fossa of the gallbladder. Yeah, the gallbladder is also intraperitoneal, except its posterior aspect, which is intimately associated with the liver. So that is one thing that we have to understand. Now again, when you look at this, is the left triangular ligament. There's no sharp boundary between the left coronary ligament. This time we can't really identify the superior, inferior, anterior and posterior coronary ligament. But of course, what we can see is that it's more or less continuous, giving us the triangular ligament, left triangular ligament. So that is what we are going to find here. Now, apart from this, now we've seen that yes, the posterior surface, which is known as the diaphragmatic surface because it's related to the diaphragm. What happens is that yes, this area tends to be smooth a bit because yes, there is no apart from the diaphragm, which gives it that smooth appearance, there is no other organ being associated with it. So, but if you look at the visceral surface or the posterior inferior surface, there are certain structures which are related to the liver, and these structures, notably, this area where we have the left lobe is the medial portion of the left lobe. What happens is that we have the area for the groove. This is where the esophagus will be related to it, actually the abdominal esophagus. And then over here we have what we call the stomach. So the gastric impression, yes, of course, the fundus, the fundic part, the body, yes, will be related to it in this manner. Now when you come here, yes, we know this will be the impression made by the gallbladder. Then this area will be the area for the duodenum. This will be the duodenal impression, the duodenal area. And then over here will be the area for what we call the hepatic flexure. The colic area will be there. Yes, so this is the area for the colon. The colic area will be here. And then over here we are going to have what we call the impression actually for the right liver. And then superior medial to this one, we are going to find what we call the area for the suprarenal gland, actually the right suprarenal gland. So that's what we are going to find here. Yes, these areas, superior in the diaphragmatic area, superior portion, this area is going to be related to, of course, the pleura as well as the lungs. Of course, the cardiac area will be here, pleura as well as the diaphragm. So these are this, but of course mainly this is the diaphragmatic area, and these are the visceral area with various important impressions created here. Ladies and gentlemen, this was actually a quick tutorial, yes, regarding the liver. We've seen, yes, the main aspects as far as, yes, the impressions that will be created in the visceral surface, are concerned. Yes, we've also seen, yes, of course, these ligaments, because the liver is a very heavy organ, therefore it must be maintained in that position by these ligaments, holding them by way of the falciform ligament, yes, by way of the coronal ligament, right and left coronal ligament, holding it to, as well as the triangular ligaments, holding it to the liver and keeping it in place. I hope it's going to be helpful to you. Thank you very much for your audience. Now, one thing that we have to appreciate here is that this is the area of the porta hepatis. Now, at the porta hepatis, we appreciate these important structures which are known as the porta hepatis, which we have to appreciate. Now, around that area, what we find is that the most posterior one will be having a larger lumen, with its lumen collapse. This one is the most posterior structure. That is the hepatic portal vein. And the hepatic portal vein actually gives about contribute about 75 to 80% of the blood to the liver, and actually having a lot of nutrients. So that's the hepatic portal vein. Then what happens is that at its a bit inferior, but this time around a bit anterior, but this time around to the right, we are going to have what we call hepatic duct, and then at its left part we are going to have what we call hepatic artery proper. Now remember that the hepatic ducts, right and left hepatic duct will give rise to common hepatic duct, which will actually join the cystic ducts, to actually give drain into what we call the common bile duct, and then eventually meeting the main pancreatic ducts, the ampulla of beta, draining into actually the second part of the duodenum. So that's what we are going to find here. So always the posterior relation, posterior most relation, the largest lumen is going to be what we call the hepatic portal vein, or the portal vein. And then at its left part, anteriorly a bit, also inferiorly, we are going to have what we call the hepatic artery proper. And then at its getting the right part, we are going to have the hepatic hepatic duct. So and remember that the hepatic artery proper is going to contribute just about 25 or 20% of the blood requirement of the liver, actually the oxygenated blood. All right, so thank you very much for your audience.